Welcome to the Giants Huddle podcast. It's all brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. John Schmeelk every Tuesday. We're joined by the one and only Shaun O'Hara. And Shaun coming off that 40-0 loss to the Dallas Cowboys with 7 sacks allowed, 12 official quarterback hits. Unofficially, Daniel Jones got hit a lot more than that. Perfect guy to talk to you about offensive line play. So let's start broadly here. When you watch the Giants offensive line in that Week 1 matchup, what'd you see?
Yeah, it was a tough performance. I think obviously Week 1 Sunday Night Football to draw the Dallas Cowboys, that defense, that's a tough draw. I mean, you saw the explosiveness, a lot of great different exotic looks as well. And
frankly, speed and a lot of guys. I mean, they just throw waves and waves. Sam Williams is their 4th or 5th pass rusher. That dude looked really good.
Yeah, even in that first drive, they wrote after halfway through the drive, there was a whole fresh new set of defensive linemen. There was 4 new guys out there, so they did a good job rotating that. But you mentioned it. Look, it was ugly. There's no way to sugarcoat this. It was a really tough performance down across the line, really. And you can't say, hey, it was just one guy had a rough game. No, every offensive lineman had a couple of plays in there that they wish they could have had back. You mentioned the 7 sacks. As an offensive lineman, when you have 7 sacks, it's not only that game is it tough to recover from, that's tough to recover for the whole year. I mean, sometimes teams will go 7 games with 7 sacks. So to start out the season with that, you're fighting an uphill battle the entire season to try to recover from that. I think the biggest thing that jumped out at me was the inability to allow Daniel Jones to set his feet in the pocket. It created issues the entire game. And the first drive alone, you could see some of the pressure. Daniel scrambled a couple of times. There were a couple of unblocked defenders. But then, even as the game progressed, there was a first down play action pass play. It was a 2-man route.
Max protection.
Mm-hmm. Those absolutely should be a big play, at worst an incompletion, but it can't be a sack. Now, part of that was the tight end, Daniel Bellinger. So as much as these sacks always get attributed to the offensive line, Daniel Bellinger did not really do a good job blocking on that play. And Bredesen and John Michael Schmitz seemed to kind of get lost, and Glowinski as well, as far as who had the nose guard on that play. So there were a number of things to correct. From a technique standpoint, let's start with the right side. Evan Neal, I think the one thing that he struggled with coming out of college was being too top heavy. And too many times he was on the ground or he was bending at the waist, and that got him in trouble in pass protection quite a few times with the speed rush.
They were just attacking his outside shoulder relentlessly in that game.
Yeah, that speed rush is probably his biggest fear, and I think that's what gets him in trouble sometimes. Is he's trying so hard to get out and cover up that rusher, and then he gets off balance. And I think that was one of the struggles. There were some good things that I thought he did in the run game. I thought collectively, as a unit, the run game, they were very physical.
Yeah, I actually thought they run blocked pretty well in the game.
Yeah, they just didn't get enough opportunities to do it.
Well,
that
when
first
you go down
drive,
16-0, and that's how it goes.
Things change. Things change really quick. There's a Mike Tyson quote about that. Everybody's got a game plan until they get popped in the mouth. I think that was definitely a product of that, a byproduct, if you will. But that first drive, there were some really good runs in there, and actually that 4th down run by Saquon, he almost broke it. It was almost to the touchdown. It was an ankle bite away on that it was 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, that short yardage play.
And I thought a lot of gap scheme in that first drive too. A lot of pullers and stuff like that, trying to take advantage of maybe the Cowboys defense, which is a little bit faster, but maybe not as big in the middle. Yeah,
there was a lot of pulling the guard and trying to kick out, and a lot of that was they were attacking Micah Parsons. They were trying to pull a guard and get a guard or a tight end on the move to kick him out. And that's one of the things you do to try to equalize a player like that. You run at him, and you give somebody an angle on the blocking with that. I thought on that 4th and 1 as well, John Michael Schmitz did a nice job. He reached the nose. That was Big John Hankins, former Giant. Mm-hmm. That's the toughest block as a center to do. And on the biggest play of the game at that point, he did a nice job for that. I thought Mark Lewinsky, he had a rough game as well. And there were a couple of moments where he just seemed to, it wasn't the initial rush, it was the counter move and staying on the block. There was one play where Micah Parsons kind of beat him to the inside, and he was just a little bit slow getting the change of direction and power stepping in. And actually he went to punch on the second move, and Micah went underneath the punch, and that was the sack. I think that was on might have been a third down sack.
Which is, by the way, why Dallas tries to get Parsons lined up on guards. Because
Right.
they're not built to deal with those type of athletes.
And they did just that. They moved him around. You saw him on Glowinski. You saw him, on Bredesen. You saw him kind of moving all over the place. So, across the board. And then Andrew Thomas, of course, that false start, which, there's a little gray area there. On the 3rd and 2, that first drive, that was kind of like the start of the unraveling. And then that moved it to 3rd and 7, and then we had the bad snap by John Michael Schmitz.
I'll put it this way. On Thursday Night Football, that would not have been a penalty. For some reason, on Sunday Night Football, that was a penalty.
Yeah, Jawan Taylor got away with it about 5 to 6 times. So I think that might have been clearly a memo sent out to the referees.
I think you might be right.
That we've got to figure out a way to solve this because we don't want this to become a narrative.
And by the way,
throughout the week.
Technically was the correct call, just for the record.
There was definitely a little premature move. And it was Micah Parsons that he was going against. So that's the Micah Parsons effect, that here you have this stud rusher, and he's so explosive on that first step that, sometimes offensive linemen can, just get a little eager. So I think those are all correctable things. And I think to your point about, the game getting out of hand early, if it was still a 1-score game, if you're down 3-0, or if you're down, by 6 points and it's a 1-score game, you could still stay balanced. And I think that there was just never any rhythm after that first drive. There was never any rhythm. Nothing ever strung together. After that first drive, I think they went 3 and out, 3 times. You had the
three
pick
straight
six,
times, yep.
On the Saquon drop. And so you just didn't stay out there. There were no first downs converted, so you could never get into that rhythm. But I think going back and looking at the film, John, there were opportunities to throw the football down the field. There were guys, Darius Slayton ran right by Trayvon Diggs on a play action pass play. And if Daniel Jones had time to set his feet, it could have been a big play. There were a couple of times where I thought that the blitz pickup could have been better. They could have done a better job kind of sliding the line one way or the other. Leighton Vander Esch came in on a couple blitzes, and I think that created some havoc. But the NFL is a copycat league, and what everybody's doing right now, what Arizona's doing, is looking at those blitzes and those fronts and those stunts, and they're saying, we're going to find out if you can put the fire out, and you have to put it out quickly. Otherwise, teams are going to continue to do it. So there's certainly a lot of room for improvement from that. I know everybody's, the week 1 reaction is, oh my gosh, are we that bad? No, this is not an indicator. I call it sloppy September for a reason. The first 2 weeks of the season, it's the sloppiest football you will see all season long. And there's a reason for that. The preseason is shortened. Guys don't get as many reps in that. So you're seeing the blocking and the tackling suffer from that. I think this is a prideful group. I think Bobby Johnson is going to, let them simmer on this a little bit, then flush it out. And then let's get back to work and let's get back to the fundamentals. Because the reality is this is a good group, but that was the first game they've ever played together. So there's some things that they still need to work on to mesh.
What did you think of Schmitz's overall performance? You mentioned a couple plays where I know you thought he did a good job.
I thought Schmitz was really stout, and this was a good defensive front. Jonathan Hankins is a big dude. They throw a lot at you from a look standpoint,
movement,
a lot of stunts, and even there was a lot of 5-down looks with A-gap pressure and stunts included in that pressure. I thought he did a pretty decent job for his first start in the NFL. I thought physically he looked the part. I mentioned the run game where he had some nice blocks on the reach block. There were some nice combo blocks. He did a nice job blocking back on some of the guard pulls.
Yeah, he sealed off an inside linebacker, I think, getting to the second level on a run off the middle too, which is good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he did a nice job with that. I think, ultimately as a center though, if you have a bad snap like that in a game, that's the one thing that driving home you're harping on. So
is that a wet ball thing, you think, or?
It almost looked to me like the ball, it slipped out. It was a little low, coming out of the hand. And I don't know if he maybe wasn't sure. Sometimes, oddly enough, sometimes at a center, there's a momentary lapse where you're like, is he under center or is he in shotgun? And so you kind of be in that gray area. But I think that's something that is fixable, and I don't think it's something that's going to be an issue. Just
to give you an idea, the Giants had 12 drives in the game, right? 2 of those drives were one-play drives, the fumble by Hodgins and the interception. So I'm going to take those, I'm going to throw them out, okay? Yeah. So you had 10 real drives in the game. Sean, the Giants only had 2 drives of those 10 where there wasn't a sack or an offensive holding penalty. How impossible is it for a quarterback like Daniel Jones to function if that's what he's dealing with? Yeah,
it's tough. And not only that, but now you get a sack, and now it's 2nd and 15, 2nd and 17. So now you're behind the sticks, and it's tough. It's tough to overcome that. And the reality is it could have been more than 7 sacks because Daniel ran away from some of those pressures and was able to get out of some of those.
And a couple got called back because of defensive holding penalties in the secondary.
Yeah, so it was definitely a tough start offensively. I think there's some things that Mike Kafka and Brian Dable are, I'm sure, looking at and saying, hey, let's find a way to get a little more rhythm before we start calling some of these plays, and so that everybody can kind of settle down. There was times, like we mentioned, when you're calling a max protection play and you only have 2 guys out in a route, those are the type of plays that you have to protect on. You can't let that happen.
Just so fans understand, it was literally 7 guys blocking 4. That's what it was.
Yeah, and when that happens, the quarterback should have all day. There's times on 3rd down when there's going to be an unblocked defender or there's going to be some pressure because you only have 5 guys. You're going empty formation and there's nobody to help out. But those are things that they can all correct. And you also can kind of look at, all right, did we help out the offensive line? If you know that they're struggling enough, did we chip enough? Do we need to have our running backs kind of, we call them swab on the way through? If you're out in a pass route, on your way out, you either swab through the B gap or the C gap, give somebody a chip on your way out. Those are things you can kind of add to help out.
Giants Huddle Podcast is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day to every day, Citizens is made ready for Giants fans with insights, guidance, and solutions. Learn more at citizensbank.com.
You're ready for a change. Payday comes early with Citizens, so go to that retreat. New you moves to the country. Now you're raising goats and launching a lifestyle brand. Are you ready for all that life brings?
All right, Sean, let's jump to the other side of the ball now on defense. Unless there's something else on offense that you think is worth pointing out. I just thought the whole story was up front.
Yeah, I think that's where it started, and that was really some of the struggles. For Daniel Jones, 2 interceptions. One of them wasn't his fault, the Saquon Barkley thing. That stat goes to the quarterback. There's got to be a way that we can fix that because, clearly that was on Saquon. But the second interception was, obviously a poor decision from that standpoint. That's something that Daniel Jones did a great job of last year, not making those errors.
Not trying to do too much on that.
Yeah, and we saw it, previous years, trying to make something happen instead of just, hey, throw the ball away, live for another down. You can't have the turnovers.
And he was fortunate on that one pass over the middle that basically took Malik Hooker out in the neck that he just couldn't come up with a catch on. That could have been a third interception as well.
Yeah, I think he's probably disappointed. There was a throw that he made to Darren Waller on kind of like a little jerk route where he was breaking to the sideline where, if that ball's to a little bit further outside, it's not batted down by the defender.
He was behind on pass to Paris Campbell near the sideline too. He threw it inside.
I think there was a couple times too where Daniel Jones probably was looking at the wrong guy. Like he was looking at Darren Waller too much, and there were other guys open at times. So
I'll tell you, he was probably looking at the rush too.
You don't want to. Yeah, that was clearly a factor. And you can't blame a quarterback when all of a sudden you feel like every time you turn your back to the defense and turn around to throw, somebody's in your grill. That's not the way that's designed. But even early on, we talked leading up to the game about how do you slow down Micah Parsons in that rush. You do screens. Well, they tried a screenplay, and it's still, Daniel was still pressured and ended up, being I think a tackle for loss on a screenplay because it got all jammed up in there. So the execution can certainly be better.
All right, a lot of people were critical of the pass rush in this game, Sean. And my answer to them, and tell me if it's fair or unfair, is that Dallas never felt the need to run 5 and 7 step drops. Dak Prescott didn't have to do anything.
No.
They had the early lead. They knew the defense was playing really well. They ran the ball fine. They weren't great, but they were fine. And it's a lot of this is game flow where, to your point, Dallas goes up big. Giants can't run it. Go get them pass rush. Dallas, on the other hand, we don't have to take any chances here. We're going to get the ball out quick. So I just think 23 pass attempts for Prescott. I just think there was a limited amount of opportunities here for this pass rush to get after Dallas just because of how the game went.
Yeah, there was a lot of quick game, a lot of the quick throws. You saw a couple of nice designed rub routes. That big play to CeeDee Lamb. The tight end did a great job kind of picking Adoree Jackson. They both actually kind of slipped on that play.
And Adoree Jackson, by the way, said that was on him. He wasn't as aware of as he should have been of all that traffic at the line.
I think part of it is he kind of, on the start of that play, he kind of slipped as well as CeeDee Lamb. And then, now you slip. Now you feel like, I'm behind him. I got to catch up. And he didn't see the tight end coming in. He actually initiated the contact. That's why it wasn't called a penalty.
And the tight end was just running around.
He ran into the tight end. Yeah. And, they have the tight end running that route for a reason. You hope that he just kind of makes him bubble either over the top or underneath. But, there was a lot of throws where the ball came out quick. So even pressures and blitzes, it didn't seem like the Giants defense blitzed as much as they normally do. And I think part of it is because the way the game was dictating it, it's, we don't want to give up the big play, and they were trying to prevent that. And, look, you're starting two rookie corners. Let's not put them in a disadvantageous position right out of the gate against one of the best scoring offenses in the league over the last few years. So, look, Dallas is a good team. They were a 12-win team last year. You could argue that they're better this year with the addition of Brandon Cooks offensively and Gilmore on defense. I thought that the pass rush, while it wasn't there, it wasn't there last year either. In 2 games against the Cowboys last year, the Giants had 0 sacks. So you give credit to their offensive line. They do have, Tyron Smith, a perennial Pro Bowler. I think that more edge pressure, they need more production from Ojulari and from Kayvon Thibodeau. I don't think either one of those guys really flashed at any point. Dexter Lawrence obviously had his hands full with Zach Martin, one of the best guards in the league. But when the game plays out the way that it does like that, I don't blame the defense for that. The offense and the special teams gives up, all these points. You're kind of behind the 8 ball. But I thought for the young corners, I thought they competed. I thought that they played really well. You did not see guys running free. There was a nice breakup down in the back of the end zone that Deonte Banks was involved in. I think there's a lot to build on. This will be a different offense that they're facing next week against Arizona with Josh Dobbs, with kind of a new staff. This will be a totally different feel and different vibe, but it's the NFL is all about bouncing back, and we'll see how they do.
All right. By the way, Giant fans love a winner. It's why they love Citizens, named the 2022 best bank in the U.S. by The Banker. As the official bank of the Giants and sponsor of the Huddle, Citizens is made ready for fans of Big Blue. Learn more at citizensbank.com.
You love turf. You're good at it. So you start a turf biz. Business grows, your savings grow. Become the most celebrated name in turf. Are you ready for all that life brings?
Final question, Shaun. You've probably been through a game or two like this before over the course of your NFL career. What needs to happen this week in the meeting rooms? Do you watch the tape? Do you not watch the tape? Where you just come back and, I'm going to just be really brutally honest, just play a better brand of football. Because if you have a game next week where you have 2 interceptions, one's returned for a touchdown, 1 blocked field goal is out for return for a touchdown, and you fumble the ball not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, but 5 times in the game, you're going to get blown out by Arizona too. Yeah. So you just have to play better. So what needs to happen this week to either flush this, learn from it, build off of it? How as a player do you handle coming off of a game like this where there's really not a ton of great stuff to take out of it?
Yeah, if this was week 8 and you'd played a bunch of games and it was like, hey, you know what, this was a clunker, we'll flush it away. But the fact that it's week 1, you have to correct it. You have to go through the film. You know what, I don't care how ugly it is, how painful it is. You have to sit there and you have to take your medicine and you have to learn from it, because if you don't learn from week 1, now it's going to segue into week 2 and bleed into week 3. Can't have it. You got to put the fire out right now. So it's got to be corrected. I think the players right now too, everybody realizes there's a lot of football left. Week 1 does not determine your season. Giants have won a Super Bowl. We won one in 2007, starting out 0-2. That's not ideal. You don't want that. But the first couple of weeks of the season, you don't try to judge who you are as a team. You just try to get better individually and collectively. And I think the number one thing is, look, the NFL is tough. It's tough to win football games. You can't beat yourself. And the Giants played sloppy football. They turned the ball over. You can't give up a blocked field goal for a touchdown. That's just technique. Those are all things that are correctable. But you have to face it. You got to face the music. And I think for this entire staff, I think they've got a good enough relationship with the players that they trust that, hey, look, we're in the right spot. We can get it done. But as a player, you're getting paid to go out and play and execute. You got to go do it.
Good stuff, Shaun.
Thanks, John.
Appreciate it, man. We'll figure out how to do this next week. I'll be in Arizona. You'll be here, but we'll make it happen.
And our eyes will be bleeding. It'll be a late night.
Yes.
And a short week.
Yes. It'll be fun, though, as the Giants get ready to take on the Cardinals. I think the hope is that we look back at this game, Shaun, in week 17, and hopefully, knock on wood, the Giants are going into the playoffs and are like, boy, that really was an aberration. There's still no explanation as to how that happened, and that now is the goal as you move forward into the rest.
Sign us up for that.
Of the regular season. For Shaun O'Hara, I'm John Schmeelk. That's it for the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. We'll see you next time, everybody.